Futures in Fundraising is presented by Alexander Haas. Alexander Haas, transforming institutions that transform lives.
Welcome to Futures in Fundraising, where we talk with experienced development professionals about their careers, their career paths, and what they see next in the field of development. Today, we're happy to have Natasha Lebowitz with us. She's the Director of Development for the Atlanta Jewish Academy. Welcome, Natasha.
Thanks, David. So nice to be here.
So, you've had a really fascinating career path, at least in my opinion. I'm wondering, though, before we get into that, if you could tell us a little bit about Atlanta Jewish Academy, and specifically about the history that brought Atlanta Jewish Academy into being.
Sure. Atlanta Jewish Academy is the first preschool through 12th grade Jewish day school in Atlanta, and it formed out of the combination of Greenfield Hebrew Academy, which was a K through 8 school, and it merged with Yeshiva Atlanta, which was a high school, Jewish high school in Atlanta.
And so nonprofit mergers are somewhat uncommon. Tell me about that process and how easy or how hard it was.
So I think the school, we always joke that it has been going on for 30 years, the talks of combining these two schools, has very similar constituency, and the majority of the kids do matriculate to the high school, so it really was a natural, but it just had never been done. So we say the reason why it finally merged was because there were two board presidents that were women, and it always takes women to get anything accomplished. So that is really, how it came to be. It's two schools, similar missions and constituencies, and it was really a natural fit for the two to finally merge.
And did you physically merge the students together, or are you still sort of two campuses under one umbrella? How did that happen?
So when the merge, when it was a unanimous vote by both the boards to merge, we were on separate campuses for 1 year. And our ultimate goal was to be one school with one mission on one campus. So we built a new high school that just opened this fall with the beginning of school on our campus at 5200 Northland Drive in Sandy Springs.
Great. And that transition has gone smoothly?
It's been great. I mean, there's always little hiccups along the way, but, getting COs is always a challenge. But we were able to get a temporary CO for the classroom space. So when all the kids came over at the beginning of the year, their classrooms were ready, but there were no lab space for them. And where they do tefillah, or where their prayer is in the morning, the Beit Midrash was not ready. So they were kind of all over the school at the very beginning, and now we've acquired all of our COs, and at the end of October we just had our big celebration event to dedicate the school, and all the kids are throughout the whole school, and it's an amazing experience.
Well, that's a fantastic journey, and the fact that it took 30 years to happen probably makes it all more sweet for everybody involved.
I think so. We have some elders in the community who are amazing supporters of our school, and I think seeing them be involved for all these years, being on the boards, being teachers in this school, educating their own children, and now seeing their grandchildren go through the ranks, it's really been a beautiful thing to see.
That's fantastic. All right, so I've interviewed a lot of people for Futures in Fundraising, but you are the first person that I can remember interviewing with a degree in apparel merchandising and marketing. So I am really curious to find out how someone who was focused on retail merchandising and marketing ended up in a development job.
It's been an interesting journey. So when I graduated from Indiana University, as you said, I was an apparel merchandising major and marketing. And I went through an 18-year career at Federated Department Stores, which is known as Macy's, and which I loved. I really loved it. And then after our third child was born, I always blame my husband, who told me I had to quit my job because I must have chosen to become a mother if I was having 3 children. And traveling to buy and all those types of things was, becoming cumbersome. So I started volunteering at my children's school, which at the time was Greenfield Hebrew Academy. And I thought, well, I've asked people for things my whole life. I'm a buyer. I asked for markdown money. I asked for, a different price on goods that I was purchasing. So I thought, how hard could it be to get involved in a gala event and work on their silent auction? All I have to do is go around and ask people for things. And I had, lots of connections. And so that's what I did. And that sort of was the beginning of the end, I would say, or as I said, reinvented myself. So, I started soliciting for that event. Then I began chairing the event. Then I was asked to serve on the board. And when I got the call, I said, you must have called the wrong person. I'm sure you want my husband. Why do you want me on your board? So they said, no, we dialed the right number. We'd really love you to serve. So I served on the board, and the first time they handed out a budget, which I was, not only used to writing, I was used to interpreting them in my job as a buyer. I had a lot of questions. So then I was recruited to serve on the finance committee. Obviously, I guess if you ask a lot of questions, you're going to be put up to do something else.
Either that or kicked out.
Yeah, exactly. No, we don't want her. So I served on the finance committee as part of the board, and we had a new headmaster, a relatively new headmaster at the time, who must have said, let's give this girl something to do. She has a lot of energy, and our kids are in the school. And they asked me, would I head up our first annual campaign? So it's interesting, a school as old as ours really had never had an annual campaign. So I said, sure, how hard could that be? I mean, I'm just asking people for money, which I'm used to doing anyway. So I launched the first annual campaign, and from there, I then was asked to serve on a steering committee to help merge the schools, and then researched to hire a consulting firm to help us with a capital campaign in order to build the high school and a competition gym on our land and bring the high school students over. And that then turned into a part-time job. I think they thought we better do something because she could go somewhere else or find something else to do. And then finally, I landed in a full-time job as a development director at Atlanta Jewish Academy. And it's been a great experience, a reinvention. So I love to tell everybody you can always change what you do, and it's fun. My tennis team is proud of me.
So tell me how, I know that you were asking people for money in a volunteer role for a long time before it became a job. So tell me how it was different, or maybe how it felt different, if it did at all, moving from being the volunteer, the board member responsible for some development activities, to actually being the director of development and that being a full-time job for you.
Right. There's definitely a difference. One is you have to get up every morning at 6:30, get dressed, and actually arrive at school, ready to move. Volunteering, it's nice because you can talk to people sort of on your own time frame. You can, go to lunch, and you can play tennis, and you can make a couple calls, and you can spend time doing the things you like to do. And then, asking people on your own time. I think that's the biggest difference. Mm-hmm. And then going full time, I was a little apprehensive. I mean, I hadn't worked full time in a few years. And I thought, wow, I've got to get up every morning. I've really got to be on. People are really counting on me, and the amount of responsibility is, huge, because people are counting on you. I mean, our budget is counting on me to deliver the plans that are put in place. And it's not so easy to say, well, I did the best I could. Now it's like, oh my gosh, I've really got to deliver this, or it's going to mean, the kids don't get to go on this field trip, or, something as simple as that. I've really got to make sure that we really can bridge that gap between what tuition brings in and expenses. So I think it's that your stress level goes up a little bit. But it was nice to already have the relationships built as a volunteer and be able to grow into this position.
Anything you remember being particularly challenging, may not be a good word, but but maybe awkward about moving from being a peer with the board members to being an employee now?
It's interesting, but I had so much support behind me and with the board president that I think everyone was just so happy. I mean, I never really got any pushback or anyone saying, we don't really think she can handle this. So I think that, those who were behind me, I had some support from Jewish Federation of Greater Atlanta. And I think that it really all just, the pieces just sort of fit together after so many years of volunteering and, being a lay leader and presenting in board meetings, that it was really a natural transition for me.
Good. So I wanted to ask you a couple of other questions, but we need to take a quick break before that. So we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back with more conversation with Natasha.
In fundraising, I'm most proud of the High Museum of Art's expansion because it was a vision by Renzo Piano, the Genoa-born architect, who's very well known around the country. And one of the things that Renzo Piano does very, very well is work with existing structures, existing museums, existing buildings. And he has just a gift for marrying two buildings together or fleshing out a campus. You can see his work at the Morgan Library in New York. In fact, one of the really good examples of this I see. But at the High, he took what we had, which was a star building, Richard Meyer design building, and he took the Woodruff Art Center, which is kind of utilitarian building. Does a lot of things inside, but not so great to look at outside. And he filled in the blanks. He designed a campus where we added 3 buildings to the complex. And not only designed a campus, he designed a new way of experiencing the arts in Atlanta. And it was great. He was smart. The donors were lovely. The director, Michael Shapiro, worked 23 hours a day. And even though I was working about 20 hours a day because he was working 23, it was just a wonderful feeling. And even now when I go by there on Peachtree or have a chance to stop in, I feel like I had something to do with that. That's important. In consulting, the clients who aren't sure that they can make something work are the ones that I often found very satisfying because we help them build their confidence without it being false confidence. And so I think that's a very interesting thing, but also a very good thing. And so I'm not going to single out any one client, but I would say every year I have 1 or 2 clients that weren't really sure they could make it work, and then they made it work.
All right, we are back with Natasha Lebowitz, the Director of Development at Atlanta Jewish Academy, talking about her career and her move from fashion buyer to volunteer dynamo to Director of Development. So, Natasha, we talked some about that transition from volunteer fundraiser to professional fundraiser. And I wondered if there were for you any resources, be they people, conferences, books, anything that sort of helped you to make that transition and, I don't know, maybe learn how to be a full-time fundraiser.
So I had a really terrific mentor. She was the first female president of Greenfield Hebrew Academy, and her name is Terry Bagan, and she was just an amazing resource for me. So they paired me with her in a lay position as a board member to launch the first annual campaign. And she really, I'll never forget my first meeting with a donor. And I think she chose that donor because she knew she would be warm. She had 3 daughters. And, maybe she would also be, somewhat of an easy ask kind of thing. And it was terrific. And I remember by the end of the meeting, the donor was asking me all sorts of questions, knowing that I was young and married with, a couple of young kids, and was asking me, do you take photographs of everything you have in your house in case something is ever stolen or it burns down? Do you photograph your luggage before you leave? So she became almost a mom to me. It was so interesting. And I love telling that story to her daughters. Unfortunately, she's passed. But it was a really beautiful story to share with her daughters that she was my very first solicitation.
That's great. Well, I think it is helpful. We try to do this with volunteers often if they're hesitant about fundraising, is to set them up for sort of an easy one to get their feet wet, get a good experience, make it a happy experience so they want to do it again.
Yeah.
So I think that was wise. What do you think as you think about people either entering the field of development or working through their careers of development in terms of the skills that are the most important to be successful?
I honestly think, and people I'm sure think this is sort of cliche, but you really have to like people. You really have to be interested in them. You have to, when you speak to them, want to do a lot of listening. You have to know, sort of what makes them tick. What do they like to drink? Where do they like to meet? What's important to them in their life? Is it important that they have volunteer roles? Is it important that you talk about their grandchildren? I really think that's the most important thing. If you're really shy, you have to be able to get out of your comfort zone, all those sorts of things. So I really think you really have to like talking to people. That's the first piece. And I do think you have to be tough. You have to be able to handle rejection. And no, it's not personal. It might be, what you're asking them to do. It may be timing. It may be the mission you're trying to sell isn't really what they're interested in at that moment, or they just don't have the open to listen. So I think it's those pieces that are really important to be successful.
I think the listening is particularly a skill that I'm not sure a lot of people new to the field associate with good development work. We run into people who think it's all about how good the pitch is, and I think often it's more important to listen to what the donor's saying than what your pitch is.
Absolutely. I love to call it listening proficiency. When anyone asks me, I think, you have to talk 25% of the time, listen 75% of the time, and you have to observe at the same time as you're listening. What are they thinking? I always say I never get out of like a coffee under 2 hours. I have not perfected that because I'm just eager to give them time and to take time with them. And I know I can never overschedule my day because I'll always be late because I take a lot of time to listen to people and, hear what they have to say and what they're thinking. So I think that can be really advantageous when you're working in this field.
So I'm curious to change subjects on you a little bit here. Working in a school environment, you get to see firsthand a lot of the challenges. You're doing K through 12. There's a huge difference between a second grader and a 12th grader, obviously, but you see a lot of the challenges and pressures that these kids are under today. I'm wondering just if you could talk some about that and what you see going on with kids in schools.
So I see the kids that, the little ones are adorable, and what I see with them mostly is impulse control. I always have a little chocolate in my office. I used to have a candy bowl, and then the kids would line up to come in and get like a little Hershey Kiss. Then I got in trouble from all the teachers. The kids don't need sugar. They shouldn't be coming in here to see you. And I laugh at it because I have a group of, 3 or 4 kids that stop in and they really need a break. They need kind of a take a break. They need to come in and see someone who will listen to them, give them a few minutes of their day, hear how their day's going. Are their teachers great? Which new teachers do they like? And they really will open up and tell you things that are pretty surprising. So I love that piece of it with all the younger grades, even some middle schoolers. Then the high schoolers, it's very different. They're really looking for independence. They are looking to make sure they're leaders and they have leadership roles. They really come in a lot of times to talk to me about something they're really passionate about and they want to do, and how can they raise money to do it. And it goes on and on. I mean, literally every day it's like 4 different requests, and I keep thinking, how can I stop this? It's really hard for me to say no, but at the same time, you know, they need to focus and decide what's really important. Is it important for them to raise money for another nonprofit because of something they're passionate about? Or is it important for them to raise money for themselves or their class grade in order to go and be part of a convention? It's just a myriad of asks. I mean, every single day it's something. And I sometimes laugh to myself thinking, I wonder if anyone in any other, you know, nonprofit has this many requests for funding a day.
And I imagine you hear a lot of pitches for car washes and bake sales and cookie sales. And
well, funny enough, what some of the kids in our school like to do, they like to directly call people and ask for money, or they really like to go door to door and ask. Yeah. I'm not sure if it's a culture that was created at the school, but they do.
I like that better, not really, transactional,
right,
but really about the cause.
They do a lot of it, but what happens sometimes is I run into some of my major donors who sometimes, I don't want to say they're offended, but they kind of say, you know, look, I've given a lot of money. I see that these are the priorities of the school, and maybe this shouldn't be a priority, or this shouldn't be what the kids are asking. So now they know I have a do not call list. And for different, you know, things that they want to do, I kind of say, don't call these 4 donors, because I already know the reaction may not be what they're looking for. And I don't want them to be set up for that. And I also don't want my donor to feel offended that they've given a major gift and now we're sort of nickel and diming them for all these little things from the students. So funny enough, sometimes I am saying, have you ever thought of, you know, selling candy bars or holding a car wash, something a little bit different, because I find they don't do very much of that in our school.
Well, that's probably good. What have any of your students done any fundraising for their project using social media?
Yes, they use all sorts, especially the high school, mostly the high schoolers. They use GoFundMe pages. They use all sorts of, you know, different medium. They use Instagram and they try to tweet what they're doing. And I mean, I'm sure everything is posted all over Facebook and different pages. I try to get them sometimes to use our Facebook page because we have an alumni base and they have their own pages for Greenfield Hebrew Academy and Yeshiva Atlanta and AJA. So it's really interesting. I'm like, try to get that piece of constituency, because that's a little underdeveloped for us right now. And I think maybe you can engage them that way. They'll actually remember when they were in your shoes trying to do the same thing, and maybe they'll, you know, give up a little funds for you.
Well, they may be ahead of the curve for those of us who do this professionally.
They have lots of ideas.
Well, that can be I have teenagers, as you know, and that social media certainly has its benefits, but it can be a double-edged sword for teenagers too. And I'm sure that's an issue both at the school and for you personally with your kids.
Absolutely.
We want them to use it productively, but to try to keep it productive.
Exactly.
I want to ask you, people outside of town may not know this about Atlanta, but Atlanta has a really large and vibrant Jewish community. So what do you think, or what do you know is the future at AGA? What are the plans?
I think the plans are really limitless at this point. We have a new building, which I think gives us now a real competitive edge. For years and years, we were in, a 1953 Rambler elementary school. So to look at our school compared to any other school in the city, wasn't so exciting. Even though the kids liked it when they got in there,
parents have to be impressed.
Right, I think so. So now we have this really beautiful facility, and we have amazing teachers. It is a dual curriculum, which means you have a concentration in Judaics and also general studies. So when you graduate from the school, you have a dual curriculum diploma, and those Judaic studies translate, I believe it's in world geography studies or something in that realm. So I think it gives parents something else to look at. It gives their kids maybe that little bit of a leg up, I'd like to say, for some differentiation, because we all know how competitive it is today to get into colleges and do other things. I think something else to note about this school that's really interesting is about 95% of our students who graduate spend a gap year in Israel. They could be in a yeshiva or a seminary or traveling or another program, but they do take a gap year and they defer their college acceptance.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really
That's a really
exciting.
high rate. You don't see that.
It is. It really is, and it's exciting. So we're just ready, and we're set to really grow and really have people come out and look at us and compare us to what's out there in Atlanta. There's lots of other private schools. There are other Jewish high schools, and we hope you'll come and check us out.
Great. So one last thing before we go, as you think about a career in development, what one piece of advice would you give to someone starting out in development or early in their career that would make them successful?
I would say find someone, I like to say, find good counsel. So whether it is your boss or it's a mentor or the board president or a board member, find someone to speak to regularly, to hash out ideas with, to talk about issues you're running into, and really think about who that person could be. Don't feel like you're alone. I love to go to networking events and also development conferences. Challenge yourself to at least go to one a year. You'll meet other people in similar situations, struggling to raise millions of dollars for their nonprofits also a year, and you get a lot of good ideas. I always walk away with one or two amazing ideas I can implement, and I feel really charged up when I get back, whether it's a lunch with my mentor or a conference that I've gone to, and it really just keeps you going. So you really don't hit that breaking point.
And you were fortunate to have a mentor from inside the organization, but sometimes you need an outside mentor too, where you can sort of maybe vent your frustrations or get some objective advice.
Absolutely. One person I found who is really terrific, and every once in a while I still call her to check in, is Nancy Peterman from Alexander Haas. She was amazing to me. She really guided me and answered questions that I would have, even if I thought it was a really ridiculous question. I thought, well, I'll just ask, hopefully she'll answer. And she was so amazing. So I can't say enough kind things about her and your working with your firm.
Well, thank you very much. That really wasn't the purpose of the interview, but
I know,
but we'll take it.
It's true. It's really true.
Well, thank you, Natasha. It was great having you. We so appreciate you coming in and talking to us about your very interesting career and everything that's going on at AJA. It's a great institution, and we really are proud to have had a small role in bringing 30 years of hope into fruition.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's it for this episode of Futures in Fundraising. Please join us again next time when we talk to another development professional about where fundraising is going in the future.